If this is your first fantasy football video on the offseason, that's perfect because these are going to be the majority of the names you see go off the board in the first two rounds of your fantasy drafts. These are going to be most times the MVPs of your team. So let's not waste any more time. If you enjoy and if you like fantasy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Kicking off here with number 10, and it's going to be Travis Etienne. And it might seem a little bit low because he was the running back 3 last season, and that includes 7 games with at least 20 fantasy point outings. Now, that also includes, on the flip side, 5 games where he had under 10 fantasy points. So it's really a boom or bust player in Travis Etienne, but this year is a prove-it year in Jacksonville for everybody in this offense from quarterback down. And with the departure of Calvin Ridley, to me, there's no doubt that Travis Etienne, is going to get even more touches in this offense, and he's going to have even more opportunity to yet again be fantasy relevant. The offensive line has gotten a little bit better here in Jacksonville, and just like many running backs on this list, this team has a lot of outside receiving talent, meaning that the boxes are going to be lighter for the running back, so he only has to make 1 or 2 cuts to take it deep down the field. So again, we know Etienne can do it all. We know he's special, but it's a big proven year. How much do you believe in this Jacksonville offense? That's the big question you have to ask yourself if you want to draft Travis Etienne. At number 9, Derrick Henry. He is Mr. Consistency in fantasy football, but now it's a little bit different because in 2021, he was the running back 1 on a per-game basis with 24 fantasy points a game, and that was, of course, before his injury, again, 2 years ago. In 2022, he was the running back 4, averaging just about 20 fantasy points a game. And last year, there was a bit of a split there with Tyjae Spears getting into the mix, but also there was a schematic change there where Will Levis and them starting to air the ball out a little bit more there in the second half of the season. Ultimately, though, with everything kind of going against Derrick Henry's second half of the year, he still finished as the running back 8, averaging just about 16 fantasy points a game. He's now, for the first time in his professional career, in a different spot. He's in Baltimore, and just to think about the schematic fit for Derrick Henry, last year, a power running back, a guy like Gus Edwards, plays the exact same way, just on a way lesser scale than Derrick Henry. He was the running back 25 last year, and he had 13 rushing touchdowns. Imagine what Derrick Henry could do. I'll leave it at that. At number 8, Kyren Williams, if the screens here will load. But Kyren Williams burst onto the scene last year in his technical rookie season as he finished as the running back 7. He's coming back to the same exact offense where last year when he was healthy, he got a ton of touches. And the only caveat here, the only thing that's different going into this year is the addition of star collegiate running back in Blake Corum, right? Comes out of Michigan, was a national champion. We know how great Blake Corum was there at Michigan. But how much is he going to be involved this year? Does Sean McVay try to preserve Kyren Williams' legs for the playoff run, right? Because this team's going to be a playoff team. Does that lead to like a 60-40 split? Does that lead to a 70-30 split? If Blake Corum is involved in this offense, how much is he going to be involved, and how much does he take away from a guy like Kyren Williams? There are some big questions here about Kyren, which is why currently I have him at number 8 on my list. But again, draft day might come around and I might say, hey, I remember what he did last year. He's going to be my first running back off the board. At number 7, we have Nick Chubb. And I know, how can you have a running back that has suffered 2 devastating knee injuries at number 7 on your list when we don't even know 100% that he's going to be back next season? I understand. But my rebuttal to that is that it's Nick Chubb. He is superhuman, and all reports say he's going to be back and ready than ever from day 1 to have a full workload. And on top of that, unlike most situations where running backs have these injuries and kind of get put on the back burner, this offense is still revolves around Nick Chubb. He is still the heartbeat of this offense. And over his last 2 healthy seasons, Nick Chubb has been the running back 6 and he's been the running back 10. And even in his 1 healthy game last year, he had 17.5 fantasy points. As long as Deshaun Watson comes back and he's still trying to figure out who the Browns actually traded for, because it's not this rendition of Deshaun Watson, if he's still trying to remember that he can actually be an elite quarterback and push the ball down the field, Nick Chubb is going to be the heartbeat and the backbone of this offense yet again. And with all the reports saying he's going to be back from day 1 and ready for a full workload, I have no issues grabbing Nick Chubb as high as round 2 here in fantasy drafts. But again, this is a guy that currently is going in like round 7, 8, and 9 of your fantasy drafts. At number 6, it is Jahmyr Gibbs. It took me a while. It took me a while to rank him, but it also took him a while to get on the right track as far as fantasy. But once we were on the right track with Jahmyr Gibbs last year, he was electric. From week 7 on, Jahmyr Gibbs was the running back 4 on the season. So basically from the midway point on, once he got the workload, he was a top 5 running back, and he was averaging just about 18.5 fantasy points per game. He ended up finishing as the running back 10 despite the slow start to the year. And now there is most likely going to be a split yet again this season with the great O-line and with the other great running back in David Montgomery. But instead of a 50-50 split like we saw last year, I think it's going to be more so of a 65-35 or 60-40 split in the favor of a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs going into this season. And some people would, hey, we looked at what he did last year with the great situation around him. This is our running back 1 on the season. Some people would say Jahmyr Gibbs is the top pick on the board, but I'm not there yet. So if you're but again, if you want to build your team and you want to draft strictly based off upside, Jahmyr Gibbs has probably the highest potential out of any running back on this board, to single-handedly win you your fantasy championships. So Jahmyr Gibbs at number 6, I'm not there yet because my big question is with David Montgomery. At number 5, Saquon Barkley. And look, really just from 5 to 2, and you can even argue from number 2 to number 10, all of these guys are so interchangeable. So again, keep that in mind as we're so far away from fantasy season. We're going to continue to get reports, and injuries might happen, and a lot of stuff can happen. So these rankings will change, and of course we do it all for free. I'll let you guys know when that happens. The next, again, a couple players, super talented players, but more specifically, these next 3 are just guys that are in bad situations in the last couple of years, but now it kind of looks like they're on the up. For Saquon Barkley, he's now in the best situation of his career in Philadelphia. Great offensive line, great weapons around him. This team is ready to win, and they're going to win at a high level. DeAndre Swift, for reference, last year in this offense was the running back 20 on the season. And he's good, but he's not elite. He's not the talent of player like Saquon Barkley. And if Saquon Barkley was the running back 8 last year with the Giants offense on a per-game basis, imagine what he could do in this offense with the Philadelphia Eagles, especially in those rematches against the Giants. I can easily see a 1,000-yard, 10-plus touchdown season from a guy like Saquon this year, and I believe he's probably a top 3 safest running back selection this year because of his situation there in Philadelphia. At number 4, Bijan Robinson. After surviving Desmond Ridder and Arthur Smith in his rookie season, we could finally get back to being excited about drafting Falcons players, and it all starts with Bijan Robinson. He was the running back 9 last season while splitting touches with Tyler Algier for the majority of the season. But that also provided us 6 games, 6 big weeks where he had over 20 fantasy points. And yes, even he had over 20 fantasy points even in his rookie debut. He still has one of the most underrated and, quite frankly, a great offensive line. He has many options on the outside, which will keep the boxes light, which I mentioned. And just with how talented and how electric a guy like Bijan can be on the field, that's dangerous, right? Because he needs to make one cut, one read, and he's gone. And again, that's 15 fantasy points for our team, right? But I believe that this is a team that's ready to win. They want to make the playoffs. And with the addition of Kirk Cousins coming in now, playing a little bit pissed off, this offense is going to be probably a top 5, top 10 offense in the league. And again, that all starts with Bijan Robinson. And number 3, Jonathan Taylor. After being the runaway, no pun intended, running back a couple years ago in 2021, being as the running back 1 in fantasy football, there has been a couple down years for Jonathan Taylor, whether if he was healthy or not. He has not been what we've drafted the last 2 years. But over the last 2 years, one thing that we can take away is that Jonathan Taylor has been the running back 12 on a per-game basis. So 12-team league, he's still a running back 1 despite how bad he's been the last 2 years. But when he's healthy and he's not suspended, he's been productive, right? Go figure. But he's coming back to a great offensive line, an electric quarterback around him that's going to take eyes off of Jonathan Taylor. And with many of the outside options on this offense, everything, all the boxes are being checked here with Jonathan Taylor. Not to mention the great offensive mind to run it all there in Shane Steichen. I love the Colts this year. I think they can make the playoffs. And again, if they're going to do that, it all starts with Jonathan Taylor being himself. So to me, as a top 3 back, I want to be shocked that on draft day, I might even have him as my running back 2, because at number 1, that's kind of set in stone. But at number 2, it is Breece Hall. He was the running back 2 last year, averaging 17 fantasy points a game. And the year prior, on a per-game basis, before his injury, he was the running back 5, which is crazy for your rookie season. But this team has suffered more injuries than you can count last year on this offense alone, and they're coming back healthy this year. And it starts with Aaron Rodgers commanding the troops, and this offense, to me, should be electric. They should be a top 10 unit. This is a team that also improved their offensive line dramatically, bringing in 3 offensive tackles, really. And this is an offense that we saw I'll say this, for the one drive that we saw this offense fully healthy last year, Breece Hall was the focus of this offense. He was the guy that got those big plays, those big touches, those designed runs. And this is a guy that can do it all. He just needs to stay healthy. And if this offense can stay healthy around Breece Hall, I think Breece Hall is in for an amazing season, whether it's through the air or on the ground. And of course, I do these rankings on either half PPR or full PPR rankings. Because, again, who plays standard in 2024? At number 1, we knew this, right? This is a guy that gives us the elite combination of floor. I think his floor is probably running back 5 outside of injury happening. And his ceiling, of course, is running back 1 yet again. But this is a guy in Christian McCaffrey that was the running back 1 last season, the running back 2 the year before. But when we look into last year, he was the running back 1 by a wide margin. He had more. Again, hear this out. Christian McCaffrey last season had more than 100 points than the next closest running back. And outside of Kyren Williams, he averaged more than 8 fantasy points a game than the next closest running back. He was far and away, head and shoulders above his competition here at the fantasy position. But Christian McCaffrey, here, allergy season, right? He's currently trying to get a new contract. And I know it's not necessarily a contract year for him, but he wants an extension with how guys like Saquon have been paid this offseason. To me, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be back next year, whether if he gets that contract extension or not. And he's the heartbeat of this offense. We know how talented this offense is from top to bottom. This team, it's their last dance for a guy like Trent Williams there on the offensive line and some other guys in that unit. This is a big prove-it year for San Fran. They need to get over that hump because that Super Bowl window's not getting any bigger. To me, as long as Christian McCaffrey is healthy, this offense is going to be dominant and it centers around him. But that's going to do it here for the top 10 running backs. We're going to close off this week with the receivers. Next week, we'll have the tight ends. Again, top 10 rankings. But then after that, we're going to get into our full fantasy deep dive. We're going to go through round by round. Who do you draft? Who do you stay away from? Or we're going to get to some more mock drafts here on the channel. If you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We do everything completely free. I don't charge you anything. And of course, I do this for the love of the sport of fantasy football.